Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the MC Squared podcast. This is episode 38, and it's kind of a special podcast. They're all special, Jimmy.
Very special.
Yes. But this one's kind of a special podcast. I've got my good friend Steve Huffman here joining us, and he's not going to say anything. He's just going to sit there in the background the entire time. We're going to talk about politics. That's actually very rude of me. That's not true. So, but no, very excited to have Steve on, and I think we're going to delve into probably anything we want to, but probably talk about some HR stuff. So. But
riveting.
So yeah, don't leave.
Don't leave.
Smash that subscribe button right now.
Yes.
We will be right back.
We got a world to see and all the time to learn.
All right, welcome back. Thanks again for joining us. So I guess Jimmy, let's go ahead and introduce our guest and talk a little bit about. What the event we went to, we kind of teased it. Steve was reminding me. We kind of teased it on our last podcast. The big event we went to. We were invited to it.
It's my special guest
by Steve.
Yes,
that's right.
Special guest.
It was the Daymar Gala.
Yep.
Is that how you pronounce it? Gala.
Yeah.
Gala. Uh-huh. We say gala.
We say gala.
We say gala.
In this house, we say
yeah.
And it was a great time. From your perspective, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. Man, they really packed out that place there at the Marriott.
The J-Dub, yeah.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And the enthusiasm was pretty awesome. I loved the auction the most personally. I think that the auction person you guys had was amazing. But and the stories of what your company does, I think is really awesome. And it was a great opportunity just to get outside of Terre Haute and see what's going on in other cities around Indiana, and then also just a nice night to dress up and act like royalty, if you will,
absolutely.
and take our wives like they're royalty. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Terre Haute kind of followed us there. So with Richard Goodall.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
The surprise
that was
guest.
So wonderful.
He was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good night.
I kind of knew what he was going to sing, but that's okay.
yeah. He was the surprise. The set
The
list.
song was not quite the surprise. But
We know it.
Absolutely. So I was going to let everybody know, where I met Steve or when I first met Steve. So Steve's a really good friend of mine. And so if you will remember, I wrote a post about this, so I think I've referenced it. I realized, Jimmy, and we're not going to do a podcast on this one, by the way, but I realized I had written a couple of posts on this, but I've never done a podcast on the old church stuff and leaving all that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. It would be terrible. It would actually be a terrible podcast. But in that season, and I want to say that was 2015-ish, 16 maybe, somewhere in that era. We were relocating. We were halfway there. We were still living back in Owen County, and we were making the trip to Terre Haute for church, and we wanted to be a part of a small group. So, were you guys a part of the recruiting small group tables, or how did that happen?
I don't really remember if we were. I think we probably had to be to get me to commit to it. So I remember I don't know what I was thinking. New location, new geography, new Steve.
Right.
And so went out of my comfort zone, and we decided to host one. We had this big house that we were all excited about. So we said, well, maybe this is one of the things that God wants us to do with it. So we signed up for it. And
was that your first? Was that the group we were part of? Was that
absolute?
Had it not been?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So we, it was actually awesome, and it was. And having Steve and that group, for Andrea and I was just a huge breath of fresh air. We were able to let our hair down. We and I don't have much hair. That's all that smirk. And you should really laugh there.
I would
Jimmy.
never have said that.
It was a huge blessing, and honestly, I just feel like we hit it off right away. I just love being with Steve and Jennifer, his wife, and their kids, and we had a really good time. But it was just another milestone of God helping along the way in our restoration, and and so thank you for that. I know you were just doing whatever you felt God was, but it was a huge piece of the puzzle of what God did in our lives, and still connections, from that to this day.
Yeah, that was cool, and it was good to see, God working in your family's life in a way that you needed it. And then, for me, getting to know a couple of the guys in that group was really cool. But then, I feel like after that first night with you and me, the friendship was on after that. And we've just not stopped since. Yeah. So it's been great.
Yeah, I think Trump came up in that first conversation.
Yes, a couple of times. Because that was right during that.
Crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. So, what is your official title?
So my official title is Chief HR Officer.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of what I've been telling people, but I was hoping I wasn't like leading them astray.
No.
So let's talk a little bit of the kind of subject we wanted to kind of delve into tonight is, it is controversial in the sense that there is so much peer pressure, it seems like, and so much rigid framework that in order to make money, in order to be advanced in your career, you've got to have a college degree. It doesn't matter what it is,
right.
but you got to have a college degree. And this the point of this podcast obviously is we're not sitting here to knock having college degrees. Jimmy has a degree. And I would have loved to have had one, but it wasn't God's will for me. But it is the reality, Steve, that there are a lot of folks out there in the workforce who've got a lot of qualifications, and they're really good at what they do, but they don't have a piece of paper saying they went to a college for 4 years. Talk a little bit about your path,
sure,
and then how this subject has anything to do with Steve.
So, when you're faced with that decision whether or not to go to college, depending on how that topic comes up in your life, whether you have influence through your parents encouraging you to go or demanding you to go to school, whatever the case may be. I didn't have that. I was actually I'd already moved out of my home.
Okay.
Age 17. I was living with my pastor's son, who had been our youth pastor for a number of years. This is for my senior year of high school. Allowed me to go to a Christian high school. And so that was great. And I really just kind of leaned into that year.
Yeah.
But my pastor's son and my friend was getting married right around May, so right when we were all graduating. So it was time for me to get out of the house. So I was faced with, well, what do I do? Do I go back home to St. Petersburg? This was in Tallahassee, Florida at the time. And I got to stay with a buddy of mine who I graduated with. And our high school class was really small. I think 26 people graduated in that class, 75 maybe in the whole high school.
This is a Christian school, too.
Christian school. And, but I mentioned it was in Tallahassee. Well, there's 3 colleges in Tallahassee. So everybody was off and going to school. And I needed a little extra time that year to graduate. So I'm finishing up in the summer.
Yeah.
Once that's over, this is a true story. I remember thinking, God, school is over. I finally graduated. And I'm turning around and people are already starting classes in August for college.
Right.
And honestly, guys, it didn't even dawn on me, just in my story, that I should be going to college. It wasn't even...
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was done in my family. We had a lot of family members that just jumped right into the workforce. So that was the first time that I was, what is this? And so I kind of put a little pressure on myself to say, well, I guess this is what I've got to do. These people that I've been doing life with and hanging out with for the last, school year are going to school. Like, it's not even a question. So I reluctantly enrolled in I think a couple of classes at the community college.
Yeah.
And you said it wasn't God's will for you. And I really truly believe that's God has people, as part of their plans to go to college, and some it's not. And I didn't know that until I sat in the class. I remember sitting in the class thinking, I know how I'm wired.
Yes.
Yeah.
What have I done? 4 years of this?
Yeah.
And about halfway through the class, I don't know what the class was. I think it was like...
Probably a tough class because they make those first ones pretty tough.
Actually, I know what it is.
Oh.
It was pre-algebra because I think I had failed that a couple times in high school. So not proud to admit, but that's what I just couldn't get past pre-algebra.
No.
Once you start adding letters into math, it doesn't make sense.
No.
I don't care what you say. So So in the middle of this class, I remember thinking, should I get up now?
Yeah.
That would seem rude. I'm going to wait till the end of the class, and I'm going to leave, and I'm never going to look back. And in fact, I'm quite literally never going to look back, just as a symbol that this isn't for me. And I make light of that story, and I'm able to laugh about it now. But I mean, that was a big kind of scary moment, because the rest of that story is when I get to my car. Well, now what?
Right.
I don't really know what to do.
How old were you at this time?
I'd say I was about 18. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then, I ended up going into the military.
Yes. How soon after that did you?
Well, about as long as it took me. I had to realize I had no other options.
Yeah.
I mean, what marketable skills that I have?
Right.
I can't pass pre-algebra. so I went to the military, and of course I was living in Florida, and I had grown up in St. Petersburg, and so I thought, well, I've had a lot of familiarity with the Coast Guard. Coast is right in the name. I like living by the water.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's about as how sophisticated my decision-making process
18-year-old
was, to be quite honest with you. Yeah.
Yes.
So then I did that, and I stayed in for about 8 years and allowed that time to kind of grow up a little bit and figure some things out.
Right.
And
So what? Okay. So when I first met you, you were a recruiter, I think.
sure.
And
Yeah.
no, is that
there's different titles, but yeah, right. yeah,
okay?
recruiting,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you were not working for the company you're working for now.
No.
At the time. So what made you? I mean, talk about that. What made you want to do that? Or decide that that's what you, or did you just
recruiting?
follow? Yeah, or
So-
the whole.
No, that's a great question, because it's part of trying to figure things out. So, we could spend another podcast talking about how I met my wife, who you know.
Yes.
And she had no interest in being a military wife. And with her story, couldn't blame her. And so, right around the time that it was clear that our relationship was going somewhere, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with that girl, I was still in the Coast Guard, and I found out that I advanced in a rank and that I got orders to Hawaii like I wanted. And as soon as those orders and the communication came in, all my friends were congratulating me and all that. And I said, fantastic. By the way, I'm going to get out. Marry this sweet thing. What are you going to do? I don't know. I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I went and lived with my grandfather back here in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And so he was gracious enough to let me stay with him. And so I did what anybody would do to try to find a job, is I went to the newspaper.
Yeah. That's right.
Because
that's right. Back then, that's true.
It was still 1998.
Yep.
And so I respond to an ad, and it's laughable now, but it was Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel experience. I'm like, well, I've got that a little bit. We had just gotten
There's not pre-algebra. There's nothing pre-algebra in it.
So
Spreadsheet, maybe.
So I respond to this ad, and this is a great story. It's the summer of 1998. It's July. It's hot. And I'm thinking that I'm going to the company that has this need.
Yeah.
And I find myself in this lobby with about 15 or 20 other applicants, all in T-shirts and shorts, filling out applications. And I'm like, I got the suit, the tie, the whole thing, because that's, how we were brought up, that you would go to an interview.
Right.
And I'm like, what is going on? So I found out that it was an employment agency that had really posted this ad.
Gotcha.
And I didn't even know what that meant. I
Right.
spent the last 8 years in the military,
Right.
and that was right out of high school. So employment agency, I didn't know what that was. And so I must have stuck out like a sore thumb. So they interview me, and I can kind of still remember, they were like, this guy's different. I mean, he's got a suit on in the lobby of an employment agency. So they start talking to me about working there. I guess they figured he's professional, and this guy's different. And so, to make this long story short, when I realized that they were interested in me, I'm like, well, what is this employment agency?
Yeah.
What is that all about? And I started doing research, and I discovered that you can earn money in it, and you can make a career out of it. And so I remember just thinking, well, that's what I want. If someone's seeing that in me, and I don't even see that myself yet, and it's a path, that's what I'm looking for, is a path, because I've already come to terms with the reality that I'm just not made to get a college degree. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I also had a drive. I knew I
Right.
wanted to accomplish something.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I started researching it, and I said, okay, I'm going to at least start heading down this path and sink my teeth into it and see where it goes. And that was about 30 years ago.
Wow.
So you went into the agency
That's crazy.
to apply for a different job, and the agency hired you.
And actually, no, they didn't hire me. I interviewed, and I wanted the job really bad. I wanted the opportunity because opportunities weren't going to just fall out of the sky for
Yeah.
me. And they didn't hire me. So I actually had a temp job doing, some administrative work, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. But I thought, so if I almost got the opportunity by accident,
Yeah.
Yeah, if I go at it.
so now let me try intentionally. And so I said, okay, that's a national firm. Maybe their standards are a bit tougher. So I found this smaller regional employment agency, looked up who the branch manager was, their email address, and I wrote them non-AI generated email
Right.
at the time, and told my story that
Yeah.
I told that story.
Yeah.
I'm looking for an opportunity,
Yeah.
a path. I interviewed here at this agency. They didn't quite select me, but I figured there must be, that's not my only opportunity. And within probably 30 minutes, that manager invited me in.
Yeah.
And then ultimately did make me an offer. And that's where it started.
That's so
I
awesome.
love that
crazy.
story.
Yeah.
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 That's awesome.
That's a great story.
There's a lot of lessons there, isn't there?
There's a ton of them. And so you were, how old were you when you did that?
So went in the military at 18, 19, got out. So I was about 26 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
turned
That's
27.
real. I mean, it's very similar. So I went straight into college right out of
Yeah,
high school
yeah.
because that's really what everybody did.
Yeah.
And I just followed that path. But then I graduated and had about a year off, but then I went back to Ivy Tech. And the difference was I was about 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
And everything meant way more to me.
Yes.
Like every study that I did, I thought, and it was like on a career path driven, right? I was like want to be a respiratory therapist, but at Ivy Tech, I mean, I was a C plus B minus student when I was in a 4-year degree, and I went to Ivy Tech, and at that age, it's like you just something clicked, and I was like, okay, I can do this, and then it was exactly that. It was somebody putting forth the effort to say, I think you're going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe in you. And so, I mean, that's a big lesson there in people who are trying to hire the right person is if you have trust in somebody, if you have trust in that person and they can see that,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the people that will excel. I mean, they'll excel right with you. I mean, I don't know. I see a relation a little bit with that because Ivy Tech's kind of that way too. It's non-traditional students in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's very career oriented. You're not going to Ivy Tech just to have a degree. You're going there because you have a job in mind or a career in mind or something. And a lot of folks are older. I mean, not all, but even like a couple years even from high school, which, I mean, you talk about the silly decisions you make at 18, which we all do. But they want you to have a
Right.
a career charted out and path at 19 or 20. You got to know what your major is going to be. There's no way.
It doesn't make sense.
There's
None of it makes
no
sense.
way.
I honestly, I think it's a little harder for boys too, or guys.
Oh, I do too.
yeah,
I do too.
I think it's a little harder
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it just takes a little bit of time to.
Unless you've got such a drive where you knew at 16 or 50,
Unless
I
you
want to
had
do
that,
this,
yeah.
and there's everything else is secondary. For me, I mean, I went to work in my dad's office product store as a copier technician. I was good at it. I enjoyed doing it. So homeschooled. I graduated. I had maybe a year or two on my own, and then I was like, life just was something was missing. So I went to college, and I enjoyed it. It was a blast. I loved college. I would have been, but I was going for pre-law and a history degree. I mean, just what are you doing? And I had to pick the most expensive school, so I was out of money, which I think God did that to me, honestly, because I was out of money, resources, and ideas in one semester. It was. I mean, they had unlimited cereal bar. You could go down there. It was great. You lived on campus. It was wonderful. But by the end of that semester, I was out of money, and so. And talking about this, because this is kind of this is something that I think, young men, people, they need to hear this conversation.
They need to hear it.
But I'm 40. At 40 years old, I started having a crisis of I was working for a coffee company. I was making good money. There were skills I was learning, but I didn't have in my mind marketable skills. I didn't have skills that I could say, then take this to the next level.
You couldn't map it out in your mind.
No, and I'm like, I'm stuck.
Yeah. It's overwhelming.
I'm stuck, and this is not good. And so then I'm regretting not getting a degree, because even though the degree would have nothing to do with anything I wanted to do, you couldn't. This when you go to apply for a job. I mean, just anything out there. I must have a college degree and 4 years of experience. And you're like, so that precludes anybody who's really good at whatever it is you're asking for.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with it. So I went and looked at all the things you could go get a degree for. I mean, and there wasn't one thing I could pick out. And that is kind of telling, because what I do now, there isn't a degree for it. I'm in sales. / customer service, account management. I was thinking about this the other day. I absolutely love my job. Yeah. I love what I do. Mm-hmm. Every single day I get up and I'm excited for what the day holds.
That's awesome.
And to put the pressure on a young kid that you've got to find that niche. Mm-hmm. You've got to find what you're called to at 19 or 20 or no later. I mean, because for me, I'm thinking that's a little unreasonable.
Mm-hmm. It's unreasonable, but I also think, because you're asking someone to choose, this is the path and this is the direction, and I get that, but you're right. It's
well, especially if you're dropping all that coin. And you're spending all that time in classes, you should know that's fair, right? You should know what you're going for. The problem is, do a lot of them end up there because it's just what you do after high school? Yeah. It's just what we have to. And in retrospect, 10 years later, you would look back and go, well, I wish I'd taken this class, or I wish I had maybe moved this in a different direction. Boy, I would have really liked to have had my focus a little different.
It's still part of someone, perhaps, everyone's got a different story, helping make the decisions for them. Because of what I think, when you talked about when you're stuck and didn't quite know what to do, that's where it really happens. It's the fear, it's the panic.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That, for lack of a better way to put it, that I think a man or a woman, right? I mean, really, they find out what they're made of, and you start out of that fear, out of that panic, out of that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Figuring things out.
Yeah.
That's really what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I think.
A little earlier, probably.
Yeah.
And again, my whole area, I was stunted because of the cult-like community that I was in. It was just very suffocating. The only thing I had outside of that was the job, which I loved. But anyway. Yeah. It's not really about that. But I think what's amazing to me is the testimony of where God took you, and how He's elevated you, and how you found yourself surrounded by people with master's degrees and doctor this and doctor that, and you're right there as their peer, helping them move a massive nonprofit organization forward. And I just think, me and you have talked before. Obviously, God had His hand here, but I think, Steve, it's so encouraging, because it can happen for anyone if that's the path God has on you.
Absolutely.
And what I saw a little bit was the tenacity and not saying no, not giving up. That not giving up.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, I remember thinking a couple of things. I'm going to have to, maybe not everyone would articulate it the same way, but I remember thinking that I have to hustle and work twice as hard to kind of overcome not having this degree, right? To get the attention of somebody that sees something in you or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple of things that I feel like when I look back that I go, okay, those were the things that I did right consistently that helped elevate me to this kind of role. And that was, I think far too many people don't understand how to identify or capitalize on opportunity.
Oh, that's good.
And what I mean by that is, well, what I tell my people, everything's an opportunity. Something's going south in a project or communicate or whatever it is, you can jump in with the naysayers or the criticizers or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you can, or you can say, how can I shine in this and turn this around?
That's right.
You know, and, but I think far too many people, regardless of what their degree is, if they don't oftentimes they have to do a good job of identifying that I've got an opportunity in front of me
Yes.
Yeah.
to get noticed,
Yes.
show what I can do, my
Yes.
results. And, so that's one of the things that I think
Yes.
is definitely what you need, the skill set that you need to have to.
Yeah,
to
I
get
think I
ahead.
failed at that for a very long time. And one of the owners of the company I work at now, I think we had just a screw up in an order. It was just awful. And he said that very thing to me.
Yeah.
Well, this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
These are always an opportunity. And I have to be totally honest. I think from that point, I've always been good customer service, but I've never seen the mistakes or the failures as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And once you embrace that to your point, you
Yeah.
really learn in the failures more than you do the
Yes.
successes.
Oh, yeah.
I joke with my team to give them that illustration. I would say, there's this episode of Friends. I don't know if everybody's watched Friends, but in this, everyone knows the characters.
You're right, right.
And the friends were going to throw a party, and they all divided the duties for this party, and everyone was excited. And Phoebe was like, "Oh, I want to participate in the party." And of course, they were all like, "Oh my gosh, we're not going to let Phoebe do anything." And they go, "Phoebe, you can bring ice." And I tell this to my team, and she's like, "Oh, ice? Oh, okay, I'm going to show you ice." And the party comes. And she's got ice sculpture. She's got dry ice everywhere. She's got snow cones. But the point is that
Yep. She took it as an
she has a
opportunity.
job that she
That's
thinks
right.
that they thought was meaningless or
Yes.
beneath her.
Yep.
And it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So.
I think Martin Luther King Jr. actually had an address to a high school class, but he had a line in there that was just I love it. It's phenomenal. But he said, first of all, there's no work that is beneath you can't glorify God through it. And he said, if you are called to be a street sweeper, sweep
That's right.
those streets so well
Yeah.
that all of heaven takes notice.
That's right.
And I do think there's some truth to that. I think we've lost that in this day and age and in this generation, the beauty of work and doing a good job. I've always told my kids, listen, college degree or not college degree, find a way to show up early.
Yeah.
Have a good attitude, work hard, and I said you will be a heads and tails above everybody else in the workforce. You will always rise to the top if you've got a great work ethic and a good attitude.
And I also try to tell my kids, I know right now it seems overwhelming and it's going to take forever. What's the opportunity here?
Right.
But really, that's when you're looking in the windshield, right?
Right,
In front of
right,
you.
right.
But when you look in the rearview mirror you go, it really wasn't that long to kind of make these things happen.
Right.
And that's a mindset that you don't want to fall into either, is that it's futile, it's worthless, it's just too much.
Yeah.
And so I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
There's a thin line between outperforming
Right.
even peers with degrees.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. It doesn't take much.
Right.
Really,
Right.
you find out to set yourself apart.
Right.
Yeah.
And stand out.
Yep.
Amongst other
Absolutely.
I mean, I think the Lord anoints each one of the people who believe in Him to be able to shine in those situations.
Right.
That's His goal,
Right.
right? That's exactly what He doesn't really care that if you have this degree or this degree. He wants you to do whatever I've called you to do and shine there.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean that's how people come to Him. That's how people
Right.
come to know Him, and people come to want to know Him.
Right.
And so I see it, and inside of any type of office space or whatever you are, there's always these voices and groups and things that get worked up about different things. But I have to always go back to there's one thing I can control.
Right.
And that's the way I respond.
That's very good.
And how I respond. And I believe that as being a believer, my response has to be a direct reflection.
That's right.
of what Jesus would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to maintain that all the time. Super hard. But once you set yourself out there as a believer, then that response has to come out. Even if it's not the most popular,
Yes.
it has to come out. And my goodness, he blesses that.
Yes.
Yeah.
When it doesn't seem like you did, like, that was a really kind of a, looking at right, that was really kind of a weird move, or that it was a weird way you handled that. He blesses that every time because that's his ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we've all seen I think that it's a two-edged sword with Christians in the workplace, because my pet peeve has always been, and I guess I've just run into them. I guess this is the problem, but
Pet
I've run
peeves,
into,
here they come.
No, I've run into Christians in the workforce who are so preachy
Yeah.
to their coworkers, and they're super out there with Jesus this and Jesus that, but they're lazy. Yeah. They've got bad attitudes.
Yeah.
They don't show up to work when they should. You can't depend on them. And they grumble. They grumble about their pay. They grumble. And I'm like, it would be better for the kingdom of God if no one knew you were a Christian than for you to, witness to so and so and be, and also the same folks seem to have a belligerent attitude about, hey, I'm being persecuted because I'm a Christian, and you're like, no, it's because you're a lousy employee.
It's because you're chronically late.
That's right.
You'll be known by your fruit.
Yeah,
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because so your fruit has to be there.
So I feel like Christians have a bigger responsibility.
Yeah.
To have character in the workplace,
Yeah.
integrity at all the time, at home and whatever. But also, I just think that I agree with you. I think if you quiet, put your head down. I mean, you're willing to share Jesus with anyone who asks.
Yeah.
But you are that light and salt in the workplace. I just think God does bless that and moves through that and can reach the people in your work, in your community. And also, kind of can happen is there's also then just that atmosphere where you begin to, the move of the organization starts to move a little more towards kingdom principles, a little more towards, if you're an honest person, dishonest people are not going to want to work near you, and they're not going to want to interact with you because they know Steve or Jimmy they're an honest person. They've got integrity. That's something that I just don't feel like we never hear this from the pulpit. I'm not bashing pastors or preachers. Maybe they don't have time, but rarely do teachers talk about this stuff. But this is stuff men really, really need to hear, and women. You're absolutely right. I don't want to exclude women in this at all. I'm not, male chauvinist. And, anyway, I don't want to exclude women in that either. But in my experience, I hate this is terrible. Generally, the worst workers have been men. The ones with the terrible attitudes that and I know that's terrible, but it honestly, most of the time, I'm not saying exclusively, but it's traditionally been a men in the workplace, and they're grumbling and complaining, and they're not getting the pay, whatever it is. But so
Yeah.
I think knowing what you carry is really important, especially it really. And I know this is going to sound kind of new worldly, but there is absolutely, when the Holy Spirit's inside of you and on you, when you walk into a room, it can soften hearts.
Yes.
And it does, and I have to kind of go back to this. It doesn't matter whose office I walk into.
right.
If I'm walking into somebody who is, let's say, sweeping the floors, or if I walk into the CEO's office.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to carry that with you at all time. And
right.
that's the thing that Jesus carried, is that when he walked in, the atmosphere changed.
Yeah.
And we have to open our eyes, I think, to that, and to realize that when I step, they've said that every place the sole of my foot treads shall be given to you.
Yeah.
And my foot is treading into here.
Right.
And it is also, I think it's a little bit stressful to maintain that, but then also there's a peace that comes when you abide in that. Because then you're like, you know what? I know who I am in the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't matter what comes at me, because I have a root that's really deep.
Yep.
And so, I don't know,
Well,
it all connects.
Let's
It's really cool.
let's talk about this. So let's talk about, because I was in this place before, but I think there's a lot of people that might be, or at least thinking they might be, misplaced. What if you're in a career and you absolutely hate it, but you need it? You need the money, you need the income, you're providing for your family, whatever it is, but you're out of where either that or you got to find some peace within where you're at. I mean, something's got to shift, right? Can you talk to that at all?
Well, I don't know that I have. I'm blessed to say that I've not experienced that.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that, early on, in that fear of what am I going to do without this degree, perhaps it was there that God knew that's going to drive him to rely and trust in me even more.
There you go. Yeah.
And so, what the other thing I didn't tell you, and I wanted to make sure I'd said before the end of the podcast, because I don't want to leave here giving the impression that it's this skill set, it's identifying opportunity. Yeah, those things are true. You and I have talked about this. God's the secret sauce. My prayer was always, God, couple things. I need the sign to be right here where you want me to go next.
Yeah.
If I'm going to apply for this job and it's not where you want me to be, I don't want to hear anything from them.
Yeah.
Or I want to tank in that interview.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
And so when opportunities would work out, I just had I knew this is where God wanted me to be.
Yeah.
And a couple things. So I didn't feel that sense of not being or being in a job that I just hated.
Yeah.
But two things. God blesses it. And that's where we fast forward to, I almost think God says, you know what? I'm going to bless you, but also while I'm at it, I'm going to show an organization that has 2 PhDs, 3 masters, and the guy with the C- GPA from high school on an executive team, just to prove that I don't need to work within the world system. But that's what I would say to the person that finds themselves in a job maybe or a career that they absolutely hate is consider, because maybe they've done this, but consider, I've tried things on my own.
That's right.
Making my own, choices in these moves.
Yes.
I'm only going to seek what you want, what you have for me.
And that's a pretty radical.
If
you haven't done it, it's a pretty radical.
Yeah, it feels risky.
Yeah.
Right, because really, what you've done all along, perhaps, is trusted in your own
your own ability or whatever it is. Yeah. That's that.
Walking by sight, not by faith.
That is absolutely what I would say. That's the right answer.
So much to the point that everyone's got a LinkedIn page, and in my profession, you really polish that puppy up to make it marketable. I don't get any, because I truly believe that it's because I've prayed, God, don't bring anything along that's not what.
Right.
And he's faithful to do that. I don't get any, and I have a marketable page where people would say, "Hey, we want to," and it happens all the time to everybody. It's quiet, and I go, "That's the Lord." Then I'm right where I need to be. Nothing distracting me. Right, trying to lure me to some other because then it breaks the formula. It's not what the formula is for me.
I always joke in healthcare that when you see somebody starting to update their LinkedIn, they're getting ready to leave.
right.
Usually like, oh, they updated their LinkedIn. I see what you're doing. Yeah.
I only do it because I feel guilty. It's been so dormant forever.
You got to keep up with everybody. He's still in the workforce?
Oh my gosh, I'm still alive over here. My LinkedIn is still, something's going on. But, but you do get those recruiters. I hate the sponsored contacts, whatever it is. I mean, as soon as you see that or the it's kind of a group email, to go into all the people that fit a certain criteria. It's like, we've looked at your resume. And I'm like, no, you haven't.
I get none of it. I don't even fall into the mask.
I think that's beautiful.
Yes.
I really do, because I know in times where I've been like, okay, this maybe I should be.
Should I be listening?
And that's what I think that LinkedIn, if something would come in at that point, you would then take your focus off what the Lord has asked you to do and be like, oh, a shiny something over here.
Yes.
And they know nothing about you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Besides what you put on that, which hopefully is all true, on your LinkedIn. And I think it can be a definite distractor.
Yeah.
Because then you start thinking, well, I could probably go over there. And, they'd probably pay me X amount more or whatever it'd be. And, I think that I agree with the LinkedIn thing. I think it is a way that when we start getting a little bit kind of shaky, we start looking, and when you start looking, you're pulling yourself out from under his wing, right?
Especially if he's got you there, he doesn't let you looking.
Yes,
absolutely,
yes.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So should we talk about your recent criminal record?
Oh gosh, yeah. I guess we can talk.
We got
about
to talk
it.
about
We
Jimmy's.
said we were going to talk about it. Yeah. So
So let's get into it.
Andrew was getting ready to say.
So, folks, this is just. I was flabbergasted when I heard this about Jimmy, and I did get his permission to talk about this. I would never do this to him without talk. But I just honestly.
It's not really a criminal record, but it's slightly embarrassing.
So
You're heading down
we've
the
all
wrong.
been there. We've all been there.
No, we haven't.
I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it. We've all been there.
Here comes
Not
the
with this one.
yeah.
Oh, baloney.
So Jimmy and Allison were going to the Crisis Pregnancy Center. They were en route to saving babies' lives. It was a beautiful thing.
It was a gala.
It was a God moment. It was a God thing. It was great. And on their way, the parking garage arm was not working.
No,
so
dysfunctional.
it wasn't even about them because there was a car ahead of Jimmy and Allison. And they're just stalled, right? They're just stalled.
The car just sat there at that thing and just didn't move. And the arm wasn't moving. They looked like they were in distress.
Yes,
like they needed help.
Exactly. So Jimmy does the right, honorable thing, gets out and rips that baby up.
In my khakis and looking all...
We're saving babies by Jesus, and threw that up. And that was great, but then there was the repercussions after the banquet. Tell us a little bit of what happened. And is there pictures? We'll show you pictures on this podcast.
Unfortunately, there are pictures.
Oh my God.
Okay, so I was having one of those days at work where everything just nothing was working out, right? It was just like everything was like coming to a halt and everywhere you go. And I was just kind of sick and tired of it. And so
there were other parking garages.
It wasn't a parking garage thing. So anyway, we pulled up. The door, the thing wasn't lifting. And I thought, you know what? I am sick of dysfunction. I'm really sick of dysfunction. It was just a long day at work.
Yeah.
Sick of dysfunction. And so I said, hey, I'm going to get out. So I just put the cars in park, went up, and just tried to lift it. And then I just lifted it straight up, and it went up. And the car went in, and I said, okay, I showed them. I got in the car and drove on in and parked. It never came back down. And everyone that got into the garage, which I didn't figure out till later, without a ticket. It's hard to leave a garage without a ticket. So we go to leave, and I'm like, I don't have a ticket, and probably half the people there did not have tickets because Jimmy lifted this door, and so I can't remember what they charged us when we left, some kind of flat fee or something, or maybe they just let us out. I don't know. It was a mess. Anyway, a day later, I get an email with pictures of myself in khakis and a plaid shirt lifting the door up. A picture of the back of my wife's vehicle, and said, we saw that you have, it worded really well, but they said that I had.
We got our eyes on you.
Yes,
we know you did this.
And I called the person back, and I fully admitted, I told them I had a bad day. I was just trying to save some babies. No, I said, whatever it takes. And so it was like $100 I had to pay.
Oh, boy.
Which was, I mean...
You're a nicer guy
it's one of those situations. I'm not going to fight. I mean, you had me on camera doing it, and it was just like a little lapse of judgment where you just kind of get sick of things not working, and you're like, I can make this work. Men were fixers, Andrew.
That's right.
And Steve, right? I want to fix the problem, but sometimes our brain doesn't connect to our muscles, and it really did take a lot of muscles to lift it up.
Oh,
but
my gosh.
that was really a dumb move. I felt really rejuvenated when I did it. I did. I felt like I was fixing the problem because nothing worked all day at work. But then I fixed this problem, and then it came back and got me. And so, we can show the pictures.
Yeah, we'll show the pictures, and it's great.
So don't do that because you got to think about downhill. Everybody needs a ticket because then they can't get out. And so there was mass confusion among all these Christians, and they were we just came to save babies. So now we get paid to get out of the garage.
So was it manned, the garage?
No.
There wasn't anybody there?
Not manned. So they hit the button to call, and nobody answered the phone. It rang, and that's what the person told me. And so I was like, I'm really sick of this now. This is dysfunction. But here, I didn't bring that up when I called. I just said, it was a bad move. I shouldn't have done it. Our car was kind of sticking out in the road. It was dangerous.
Yeah.
I was saving the day. There's a lot of ways I could spend it.
You're
But I
a
messed
lot
up.
nicer than I would not have paid the
Yeah, I don't-
$100. I would have
not gonna
protested.
fight
I would
it.
have said, "Hey, you wouldn't have gotten the money from the people leaving if it wasn't for me."
I was going to a Christian event. It was that thing we were talking about earlier. Right? I have to be like, oh, sure. How much money you want? Whatever. I messed up.
Was the grace with the
You don't know. That might have touched somebody that I paid.
Well, it touched me. I laughed my head off. I think that's so funny. You just wouldn't think Jimmy had it in him. Actually,
I'm surprised my wife didn't stop me.
Me too.
I think she probably tried to talk me. I was just in the zone.
That's how they got the
Tried to
pictures.
talk me down. She got the pictures of me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they got cameras all over those things, by the way. Don't mess with the door. Don't mess with
Note
the
to
arms.
self.
Don't mess with the arms. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was good.
It's been expunged.
Yes,
It's been expunged from
it's
my
out
record.
there. It's healing. So yeah.
Well, so since you told a parking garage story and
Yeah.
you went to the gala, now Andrew went to the gala 2 years ago, and we invited my mother-in-law and her husband. They're a bit older, I think,
Putting it
in their
lightly.
80s,
Yeah. Okay.
and they don't have a credit card for a variety of reasons. So, and I didn't think about it when they were coming to the gala. We don't have a credit card. I said, don't worry about it. Just want you to be there. So, but they ended up leaving a little bit early. Maybe it was a little bit loud, a little bit late for them. So they leave, and we didn't really talk to them the rest of the night until a couple of days later. They shared that they went to the parking garage to get out, and they had cash,
Card only.
but it's card only.
Cash.
So my father-in-law gets out of the car. No, same story. There's no one's manning it. The event's going on, so there's not people out there. And he lifts the gate and gets my 82-year-old mother-in-law in the car, but he's not quite lifting it all the way. I mean, and I'm thinking it's scraping but there are people watching somewhere in maybe another garage on camera.
And they come.
Oh, yeah. So it's something about these parking
I
garages.
know. What is it? The arms aren't working. We're going to make it work.
Yeah.
But he couldn't hardly pull it off, could he?
No, they're like, what are you doing?
And if you knew them, if you'd seen them, you'd be like,
dressed
what were you even trying
dressed
that
for a gal in a fancy, avoiding $20 at the parking garage.
Oh, brother. I don't even think the fee for Terre Haute's parking garage is that high.
No, it's not.
a couple bucks.
It's
I mean,
not,
it's not
unless
much.
you left the gate and
Yeah, then it's $100.
it was like a maintenance fee is what we had to pay. So
Oh, there's no way you broke it. Do you think you broke? There's no
Andrew,
way.
I didn't question. I just paid. I'm glad this didn't happen to you.
Okay, yeah, I would have been arguing it. You'd see me in court going, no. It's not fair, Your Honor.
The Lord told me
Yeah, no,
I'm not supposed to.
wait, God wants nothing to do with it. I wouldn't bring him into it. God's over there going, oh my gosh, just admit it. Pay the $100. So, okay, let's see here. I think we had, that's pretty much wrapping it up. I feel like, the only leadership principle I have that kind of tied in with you meeting your wife and leaving the Coast Guard was that the leadership principle of you have to give up to go up, or you have to. There's always a trade-off. You for whatever it is you're looking at for, whether it's a career advancement, whether it's a new spouse, whether it's a house, whatever it is, a move. And we were kind of talking about this earlier before we were on the podcast. Even in a new neighborhood, but you've got traffic issues. You're always going to have a trade-off. And what's important about it is to have that in mind, because you just know, okay, whatever the consequences are, whatever the trade-off is, I'm willing to pay it. Know you're willing to pay it when you make that decision. Not we made the decision, we moved, and oh my gosh, what's happening here?
Well, and it throws you back into that out of your comfort zone, a little bit of a fear. And that's where the things happen.
Yeah,
it puts you back in that spot to kind of see what you're made out of, the squeeze.
Yes,
And
squeeze.
that's a good place to be.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that was, 2014 to 16, pretty much the most miserable time of my life. I mean, it was just awful. And, but God did so much good stuff in me through that. And everything in my life that's been fruitful and blessed, I can point back to, obviously, I mean, you know, married long before that and wonderful marriage and all that stuff. But I mean, there's just been a huge amount of fruit that's come out of the pain and suffering and struggle. And I don't know any other way to do it.
And your obedience in that period of time as well.
But I mean, going into a black hole of not even knowing where to go. I mean, I know the Lord and don't even know which career move to make. I don't even know. I mean, it was rough.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like it's so stupid because this is a ridiculous exaggeration. But for everybody that goes through the fire that God puts them in, it always feels like the worst fire that's ever happened since the beginning of time. I did feel like Job. Oh my gosh, you know, here I am. My life was nowhere near what Job's was, and of course, you know. A lot of things were good. I mean, our health was good, our marriage was good, kids were good. But boy, that time. I mean, we should do a podcast sometime on the fires of God and the good that comes out of it. I don't know if anybody wants to watch those. All you talk about
burning
is the fire.
away the chaff.
Yes,
right?
but it's so essential to good fruit and good things coming out of your life.
And then as a parent, it's tough. You know, you went through it on your own, and that was tough enough. You know, we've got adult kids. Well, we do. You don't yet, I don't think. But
Close.
You know, they close.
Connor,
Okay.
Connor.
You know, and I think a lot of parents have a tendency to want to let their adult children lean on them too much or bail them out. It's tough to let, and we're going through it right now. To my oldest son and my oldest daughter.
Yeah.
To let them, I know. I need to let them kind of have their own fear.
That's right.
Their own panic.
That's right.
And it's really great when you see, because you kind of can feel bad as a parent initially, like, oh, my, letting go too much. But when you start to see them come out of it on their own, that's when you know, yes, it's happening over again.
Right, and not because you urged it, but because they've come to that on their own.
Yeah,
and I think that's really really key.
Yep.
Yeah,
but it's tough to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you always have to be waiting there, kind of like, and this, not necessarily as the prodigal son, but as not even if they're prodigal, but I'm just saying if they're going into this, where was the father? He was waiting on the porch with a robe and a ring.
Yeah, there's still access to the father.
With a robe and a ring, and as soon as it started to come, he met him.
Yeah.
He didn't wait. He didn't
go to the pig pen.
He didn't go.
Right.
He didn't go to the faraway land.
Right.
But I believe Jesus was at the pig pen.
Right.
That's when he came to himself. Jesus was there, and he turned at that point.
Yes.
And the Father was waiting for him to come.
Yes.
And I think that's a hard place because you want to go
it
all the way there.
is. Yeah, we're in the
and
same
pull them
spot.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. But you don't want to do that premature the work God's doing.
Right.
And that's the key.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, before we finish, we're going to wrap up, get out of here. Would you, any words of advice to someone that's in the job force that's seeking, or maybe is seeking the Lord right now, or struggling? I mean, would you just, whatever's on your heart, what advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say that it's this leadership quality or whatever. It's you gotta follow where God wants you to be.
Yeah.
Right. You've got. I mean, you've got your mug here.
Yeah.
It says,
It says, a man's heart plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps.
That's it. Yeah. That's the advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
And even if you don't know the Lord, He knows you. I mean, that's the beauty of it all. He's waiting. He's waiting for you to reach out.
Yeah.
If you're in that situation, I've never spoke to the Lord, and I've never really felt a closeness, or that He is still there and present in every situation.
Yep.
And all you have to do is turn towards Him, seek His counsel, seek His face, and He will show up every time.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Absolutely.
And I remember, I remember when I knew college wasn't for me, but I also remember thinking, this is dumb because this is what everyone else is doing. I'm swimming upstream, or I'm going against the grain. And real quick, but I continued following what I just knew was right. And, my father, you've met my father, he listens to the podcast. I didn't know him at this time. I really kind of got reunited with him a couple years later. And what I learned was he didn't go to college.
Yeah.
And he had a very successful career.
Yeah.
His father, self-made millionaire, 7th grade education. So I also feel like part of it was just kind of how I was wired, and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know
Isn't
it.
that something?
And so all this time I thought, why this drive? I just know I'm not supposed to do that. And so when I met him, and then I met my grandfather, there it is.
Yeah.
You connected to your wiring.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you figured the wiring
Yeah.
out. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Well, folks, we want to encourage you, please, to subscribe and like this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to this podcast on any of the major podcast services. Apple, we're on Buzzsprout, but nobody listens to Buzzsprout.
Yeah.
So that's just our, Apple, Spotify, somebody was on Google, I think.
Yeah, Google Podcasts.
So there's I think we're on at least 10 of them. Share this with a friend, and what else?
Hope it's encouraging to you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, appreciate having Steve.
Thanks for
Really
having me on.
appreciate
This was a
you being
blast.
on.
Yeah,
This is
when
a
you
lot of
guys
fun.
told me that you didn't really plan, you just kind of sat down. I didn't believe you, folks. There's no planning.
There's nothing goes into this. Whatever. Any questions or comments, please send us an email.
To the MC Squared Podcast at gmail.com. The MC Squared Podcast.
And Jimmy will read it and not respond. I will read it and respond.
Andrew's the respondent. I just like reading them.
Thanks again for watching. We really appreciate it, and we will see you guys next time.
Yep. See ya.
Thanks.